Doug, hello, sent me a great email talking about his heater and his experiences, and he had some questions, and I'll just cover them here because they were great questions, Doug, and they're ones I get a lot. And first and foremost, actually, I just want to talk about something that Doug brought up in his email, but it's something that I've experienced many times, and I hear about it all the time in people's builds. As something that manifests, and a lot of times people are slow to identify the issue, and it's something that I've seen over and over again, and so I just wanted to talk about it really quick, and that is the presence of a lot of bare metal in a build, or a skin, as it were, that can radiate a lot of heat. People often underestimate how much of a load that puts on a system. In other words, how much heat that they can extract with bare metal in a system. And so often the reason, or the way this manifests so many times in a build, actually harkens back to the early days of the traditional hippie build with cob and flue pipe. And when you're building those, you'll have these big flue pipe runs, and then your group comes in and you start to slowly cover them in cob, usually while you're burning. And what you'll find is that as long as that flue pipe is exposed, the stove runs terribly. And that's because that flue pipe, even just a little piece of it, think of a 6-inch chimney at 29 square inches of cross-sectional area, and now amplify that over that skin of that stovepipe running through your bench, you can see you just have a whole lot of radiating surface. So it's just like rabbit ears or elephants, anything that expands the size of their skin to give them more blood vessels, surface area to bleed off heat. And so the reason I'm bringing this up, it all sounds patently obvious, and it really is, but I get this a lot. People will have a new build with exposed stovepipe, or they'll build builds like Peter's, or like what some of my early experimental builds were. And Doug, this goes right back to your question. Doug has a build that is barrels with rocks inside, something that I experimented with, probably almost 10 years ago. I posted on Donkey's board about an inside-out kind of mass idea that I had, and it's since gotten some legs. It wasn't I didn't invent it, but but since then Peter's built a few like that, and I have too. And what we found, we experimented with something like that at Paul's a few times, is that you really need to limit that metal surface area, or you'll never get adequate draft. And so, Doug, this is just a comment on your describing your home system to me, and the way that you always need to use a bypass, and you feel now you're 100% certain that the bypass is mandatory. And I just wanted to say, I agree. I love bypasses for starting up, but once it's masonry, it will behave far differently with regards to startup and with regards to retaining draft at the end of the system, because the metal doesn't it has no entrained heat, right? It's just as soon as it sheds it needs to get more. So I just wanted to bring that up because I hear that a lot, especially in new builds. People will have like a big, flue pipe run spread out, and they'll go, gosh, it's not working. Should we keep going? And you really need to consider that you have so much metal there that you're losing a lot of heat. So you're losing a lot of your draft. And I think that's an important thing to think about in general with design, because I think people often oversize their metal radiators part, the metal radiator part of their system. And that's one of the things that with the tiny stove and the cook stoves that I've really come to love, is they have just a nice ratio of radiating surface to masonry mass, so you don't give up too much. So just wanted to talk about that, Doug. That was something that was really interesting to me in your email, that perhaps you weren't had picked all the way up on. As soon as even though you have a lot of mass in that build, you just have a lot of exposed skin. As soon as you get rid of a lot of that metal, it'll behave a lot differently. So exactly, Oregon Coast Green Man says heat in masonry can be lost back to the interior to maintain a temperature differential at the exhaust from the heat exchanger section, and that's exactly right. You know, that's the thing is a masonry stove, and this actually ties back into people asking me about leaks and carbon monoxide risks in your living space and why that's not an issue. And it's what I'm always trying to explain is that, you know, your metal box stove doesn't have any way to perpetuate draft once the fire is out. And so when you can have a situation where coals are smoldering, making carbon monoxide, and the stove box is ice cold, and so you can get CO in the space, that's really difficult to do with a masonry heater, because if you've been successfully burning the heater, then it's already warm, you'll have built-in draft, and it's always going to be pulling out. If you haven't gotten the heater warmed up successfully, then it's going to be blowing smoke out the door when you're trying to light it, and you're going to know that you're putting CO in the space. So I don't feel like they have much risk of surprising you with CO in the space. They can definitely puff back and blow stuff in your face and leak, but once you get that draft established, because the masonry can maintain that draft for hours after the fire goes out, leaks aren't an issue, and draft is much more stable. So those all metal builds, metal skins, really finicky. So I just want to touch on that. It was a little bit of a departure there. I hope that didn't go too long, but I wanted to go back. Doug had a lot of great questions.